World War II was the deadliest war in human history and has had lasting effects worldwide. But how did the defeat of this war affect Japan? Specifically, how did it impact the way the young Japanese men were taught, trained, and expected to behave? I will be showing how the Japanese education system unconsciously led to a rise in juvenile delinquency. During the war, a militaristic and ultranationalistic way of teaching peaked. By 1941, public elementary schools became the national people's schools and played a crucial role in Japanese militaristic wartime education. At this point, all students were taught to be dedicated subjects to their emperor and were encouraged to fight the war for him, glorifying the imperial army and navy. This worship continued until World War II ended, and it was welcomed by schools and communities across the countries. At the same time, youth military training centers were integrated into schools and often saw their male students spend around 350 hours in military training, while being under strict surveillance from their superiors in order to avoid any kind of juvenile delinquency. This training came in handy when the war turned for the worst, as the country expanded their conscription and drew students away from school. Simultaneously, Japan experienced labor shortages, so the remaining students from the higher education elementary schools were now required to work in factories and farms, where they underwent military-like training and surveillance, keeping them on a strict schedule. Coincidentally, a sharp increase in juvenile delinquency was soon experienced. This is a natural response to a great defeat, such as the loss of World War II. A defeat in a country who played a significant role in a war means that immense changes in the political and social structure of the nation is bound to take place. Post-war Japan was no different. With constant food shortages, a lack of basic necessities, and extreme privation, there was an increase in looting that has been explained as the Kriminalität Determinierad by Exner and Leibman. Essentially, this manifesto describes an age group that struggles to find a purpose in life and consequently engages in acts of violence and crime to fulfill themselves. This time of uncertainty allowed for the black market to flourish, as a loss of time between commercialism and impoverished schools and homes impelled juveniles to delinquency of authority of law and morality. The Japanese government noted that a series of public property had gone missing, such as post boxes, fuel, and door handles at this time. Because of the pressures that were felt by young Japanese men to succeed in the war for their mighty emperor, the defeat affected everyone. The consistent training students received was in honor of the nation and the emperor. With a great loss as the World War II defeat, young men specifically were felt feeling useless and with a lack of purpose. Thus, this energy was transferred into something just as aggressive, crimes and violence. Directly after the war, Japan was under the Allied occupation led by the United States. At this point, the general headquarters of the Supreme Commander for Allied Forces abolished Japan's militaristic wartime education that was previously based on the Imperial Rescript on Education, a government policy outlining guiding principles for the nation's education system. This general headquarters removed any nationalistic and imperial doctrines and implemented a new so-called democratic educational system modeled after the American school system, commencing the U.S. education mission. This mission deployed 27 progressive American educators who stayed in Japan for less than a month and submitted the recommendations concerning reform in educational system, a report that became the blueprint for post-war educational reform in 1947. The government proceeded to enact two laws, the Fundamental Law of Education and the School Education Law, both emphasizing egalitarianism and educational autonomy. These were implemented immediately and saw the Ministry of Education emphasize a progressive, child-centered education system. Critics of this new system saw this to be aggravating the juvenile delinquency of the après-la-guerre generation, as many teachers were not trained in the new technique of teaching, that students would not reap the benefits. By the mid-60s, the second wave of juvenile delinquency occurred in Japan's period of high growth. This saw great economic growth and a changed society, but it also witnessed many juvenile crimes, most of which were larceny. This period of high growth began once Japan regained their independence in 1952. Many laborers in the manufacturing and service sectors increased at the expense of the agriculture sector, as sons moved to urban areas post-grad to become salaried employees, the salarymen. To become the salaryman, the education system underwent another set of changes that was designed to produce more schooled and qualified laborers, as education was now regarded as a vehicle for upward social mobility, especially for young men. One way that this was accomplished was through the implementation of entrance exams for high school and university admissions. All high schools were academically stratified, and admissions to advanced schools and universities soon became quite competitive. After these exams had been successfully passed, these men moved immediately to a full-time permanent employment. Many have said that the competition to get into the best advanced schools are the root issue of juvenile delinquency. To be accepted, students had to take frequent achievement tests that were quantified in terms of statistical deviation scores in order to show each student's capability in each subject. To do well, mothers often took it upon themselves to be involved in their child's education while the father was off at work. This mother is known as the Kyoko mama, or education mother. This sense of overprotectiveness and over-involvement has been noted as interfering with the growth of a child's subconscious. While the mother of the child often rescheduled chores and household duties so her children could study, they were also losing valuable free time. Professor of psychology Peter Gray has noted that children do, in fact, need free time. He demonstrated this need by breaking it down into 5 reasons. 1. It allows children to develop a connection with their own self-identity and self-guided interests. 2. Through play, children learn how to make decisions, solve problems, exert self-control, and follow rules. 3. Children learn how to handle their emotions, including anger. 4. Free time helps them make friends, get along with others as equals. And 5. The play is a source of happiness. This lack of free time could very well lead to undesirable attitudes towards other individuals. So while the mother is raising the children at home, the father is seemingly not present. As Japan became more economically dependent and grew as a major player on the international field, fathers were rarely seen at home. Ergo, he would lose his influence and control over the home environment. In fact, in the 70s, the media constantly addressed this phenomenon as Chichinaki Shakai, a fatherless society. A new education system, an overprotective mother, and a lack of free time were steps taken in order to make their son an ideal salaryman. Becoming a salaryman, however, is not as easy as just landing a corporate job. To become the ideal salaryman, a variety of disciplinary techniques are presented to the men in order to craft them for the corporate world, which included ways on how to dress, learning proper manners, how to bow, read, and eat. This is all done so that at work the men can become the Kashai no Ninjin, or a company person. This mentality of disciplinary training is quite comparable to their school training, where they were disciplined to study very hard so that they can land this job. The competition of military-like training these men have experienced from a young age all the way through to adulthood and the corporate lives is bound to psychologically break an individual and make them lash out in undesirable ways. This is especially the case when a child receives a low deviation score and doesn't succeed in school and land a salary job. Thus, a sense of inferiority and a failed social respectability is felt. Hoisei University professor Chiba Yasunori stated that these individuals have many internalized feelings towards themselves, such as having a low opinion of their own intellectual abilities and feeling a lack of purpose in life. There is little incentive to uphold the existing social framework that didn't add anything positive to their lives, plus a strong animosity towards the elites that have academically and professionally succeeded. For male students, not attending an advanced university and obtaining a corporate job is seen as a failure. The unsuccessful students are known as ochikubure, or those who fall behind. It's those who are seen as ochikubure that are the main sources of delinquency, as they have the same amount of free time as others, so they tend to gravitate towards each other. This led to the Bosozuko phenomenon in the 70s, the rise of youth gangs that were known for violent and destructive behavior throughout Japan. These gangs represent the frustrated youth who lost the academic game and didn't have another way to pursue life. Going through life thinking that your sole purpose is to serve the emperor and nation places immense pressures on oneself and frankly should not be a reflection of the child, but rather a reflection of the failure of the entire community to integrate youth into society alongside the core values of Japanese culture. Due to the pressures to behave according to social guidelines and a lack of choice throughout life, many young Japanese men have felt as though their only outlet in life is through criminal acts.